All right, I am going to call this ceremony to order. If folks would take their seats. Gotta come up and stand with me, Peter. This is, in fact, a sad occasion because we are losing Peter. Peter came onto the council in 2009 when we were both new council members. But he was not new to town government because he had already served on
Recording in progress.
On planning and zoning for a decade before he joined the town council. So that in some ways he was the best prepared of all of us because he knew what the town was doing, unlike the rest of us new councilors who had a clue, but not really a clue. So there are a number of things that we're going to miss about Peter leaving here. I doubt that we will ever find another expert in insurance law to help us through. That's a blessing or a curse, I'm not sure which, but
I'm not sure.
Also, one of the things that Peter has really made himself a name for is making sure that we stick to our principles of free speech and equal political opportunity and making sure that the rules that we pass do in fact guarantee public access and civil rights and speech rights and all of those kinds of things which we think of as Bill of Rights and constitutional rights. So he also wields a very annoying pen when it comes to proofreading and making sure that the words are exactly what they mean, the commas are in the right place, and he usually catches mistakes that others of us have just sort of glossed over. So we will miss the corrections, but I'm not sure we'll miss the time taken to fix stuff during council meetings. So anyway, Peter, I have something I want to read. We had an email from Paul Shapiro, who was also a new council member, came on after we did, but served as mayor. And he says, there's so much I can say about Peter's service to Mansfield and the thoughtful way that he analyzed every issue that came before the council. But the most powerful impression Peter left on me was his civility and his decency. Peter always looked for the good in people, even if it was not readily apparent. He was polite and kind to everyone who came before the council, regardless of whether they reciprocated in kind. Peter is a rare and special person, and I hope that these qualities are matched by those who serve on the council in the future. Best of everything to Peter from his old friend, Paul. So it's hard to match that, but we are going to try. We have a proclamation which we will officially approve later this evening, and it reads as follows. Whereas Peter Kotchenberger had served the town of Mansfield for 13 years as a member of the town council, and whereas Peter has been active in the Mansfield community for over 23 years, serving on several boards and committees, including Planning and Zoning Commission from 1999 to 2009, and the Emergency Management Advisory Committee from 2013 to 2022, and whereas Peter devoted his time and energy to improving the quality of life for all the residents of Mansfield, and whereas Peter has always adhered to the highest standards of professionalism, and whereas Peter has been a champion of constitutional protection of free speech, and whereas residents of the town of Mansfield will remember Peter fondly as a colleague, mentor, and friend, and for his common sense approach to leadership and passion for integrity. Therefore, be it proclaimed that I, Mayor of Mansfield, on behalf of the citizens of Mansfield and the Mansfield Town Council, does hereby extend our thanks to Peter. Do hereby extend should have talked to you earlier. Extend our thanks to Peter Kotchenberg for his meritorious and dedicated service to the town of Mansfield, and wishes you all the best in his future endeavors. And I've signed this. So. We also wish to present Peter with a token of our appreciation, this lovely plaque, which reads, "The town of Mansfield, Connecticut hereby gratefully recognizes Peter Kotchenberger for his meritorious and dedicated service on the Mansfield Town Council from November 2009 to July 2022. So. Now, none of this mentions the fact that he bakes great cookies, but that's fine. Okay, so Town Manager Aylesworth would take over for a moment.
So there's something of a long-standing tradition when long-tenured staff and department heads leave to commemorate their service with some treasured pottery. And whether you drink your morning coffee or something a little stronger from this, we'll leave that to you. It's a cup of many purposes, but hopefully you enjoy that and hope you think of us often. And I just want to say on behalf of all the staff, Peter, what a pleasure it's been to work with you. As Mayor said, you have tremendous expertise in a lot of key areas that we're going to miss, but you're a good-natured individual. And while we've only had a chance personally, I've only had a chance to work with you for 2 years, I know that you're going to be missed by a lot of people. And I wish you the best over the next 9 or 12 months. So, thanks.
Well, I guess I have to be brief, unfortunately, because the meeting starts. But I do want to first thank a number of people. One is Tony, and then Ryan for this. You can't live up to those things, but the good thing is I don't have to try, because I won't be here for 9 months, so you don't know how I'll do. But it's been, I mean, from 2000 when I started, someone suggested in 1998, 99, what's go on planning and zoning as an alternate. We have someone. And I said, oh, okay, I don't know anything about it. He goes, don't worry about it. And so I went on, and then I, decided to run for full office. And it took me an embarrassingly long time to learn what riprap was. Like years to try to figure out what that meant. And I've never been great at reading site plans. But then coming to the town council, I felt, okay, that makes sense because it's about law and procedure. And that's, what else would a lawyer or a law professor want to spend their time doing? And it's been, really great to do that. I've had the privilege both here, at planning and zoning here, to work with great chairmen, Audrey Barbaret and Rudy Favretti. And then here, Betsy Patterson, Paul, and Tony Moran. When I think about it, that's actually not a lot of turnover in the 20 years in terms of the different positions, and that says an awful lot about the people who serve this town, the people who work and serve all of us and the town itself. So it's been a wonderful time. It is time to step down. Who knows? I'll be back in Mansfield in 10 months or 11 months, but who knows what will happen then. But it has been a pleasure, and the reason why it's been a pleasure is because, of course, the people. The work itself, at 11 o'clock at night, I remember thinking, I don't really care where the stone wall goes now. I just want to go to sleep, which I never said until today. But, and then, some of the meetings here where we're, a colorful and active group of people that come and talk to us, we work with, and I wouldn't have it any other way. This is a wonderful community, and I think that's why so many people stay. It's certainly why, I've done this along with everyone else, done this volunteer work for years. And I want to thank all the people in the town I've worked with, which is many. It's been a privilege, and also, the people of Mansfield who have seen fit to vote for me, and I appreciate that. It's easy to say it's a privilege. But it really is, as we know, and I am forever grateful for that opportunity for many years to serve this town. Thank you very much.
What Peter hasn't mentioned is that for many years he was the top vote getter among council candidates, so he's very well known in this community. All right, we'll take a 2-minute break and then we'll come back and start the regular council meeting. All right.
Go. Okay. All right, I'm hanging up, Dan.
All right.
Whose voice is?
Okay, we're good with the Zoom now.
Can you hear the
Oh,
council
but-
chambers, Tasha?
I can hear, yep, I can hear you and the Zoom participants can hear us. We just have to wait a few minutes. Okay, the booth is up.
So I can call the meeting to order?
Yes,
Good. Okay, this is the July 25th.
Recording in progress.
This is the July 25th, 2022 meeting of the Mansfield Town Council, and I am calling the council to order. First item of business is a roll call. Ms. Chang?
Osberger.
Here.
Berthelot. Here. Bruder.
Here.
Coleman.
Here.
Fertoni.
Here.
Kotchenberger. Moran.
Here.
Shuren.
Here.
Shaken. Thank you.
Is there any member of the public who wishes to address the council as part of this opportunity for the public to address the council? Seeing nobody, I will move on to the next item, which is the report of the town manager. Mr. Aylesworth.
Thank you, Mayor. A few items to update the council on this evening. First, want to let folks know that we are nearing the end of what has been about a 10-month journey thus far in terms of our work with TSKP Studios on the Municipal Facilities Needs Assessment Study. Right now, there's still some things to be buttoned up, but we are working diligently to add this to the agenda in terms of a full report out to the council on quote-unquote Phase 1 findings and recommendations at the August council meeting. There's a chance that despite our best collective efforts, it may bleed a little bit into September, but I think right now the August meeting, August 8th, we'll be able to achieve. And so we had a great session, at least I thought it was a great session, meeting with department heads this past week, an all department head meeting to talk about the latest iterations of things and get additional feedback, kind of group feedback, because a lot of those discussions have been more of a one-on-one nature with departments. And I really think we're starting to zero in on what I believe will be hopefully a very well thought out series of recommendations for the council to consider as part of that Phase 1 report. Just to let the council know, thank you to those who have already responded to the latest doodle scheduler I pushed out today when it comes to the goal setting session. However, unfortunately, 4 out of 8 responses in, and every date that was proposed already had a conflict for somebody. So our efforts to find a date that works for everybody and get unanimous participation, it seems that this is a very heavy lift, so hopefully we'll be able to figure this out. We'll just keep looking at dates until we do. We are finalizing the schedule for the second installment of the Mansfield Local Government Academy. Last year was very successful. Very happy to say that the feedback we received from the year 1 participants was very positive. And just as I did, in the last year, I'll say again, it really was the success is, 99% of that success was the hard work and the preparation and thoughtful kind of session planning that all the department heads and their staff did. And so we're looking forward to the second installment. We have changed the schedule a little bit. We've added a couple sessions based on the participant feedback last year. In particular, there was a thought that splitting police and fire into a couple different sessions as opposed to one public safety session, as well as adding the public schools, would make sense. So we're basically transitioning this from a 10-session program to a 12-session program, and looking to start the sessions a little bit earlier, starting them in September and wrapping up in this calendar year as opposed to straddling the calendar years.
Mr. Aylesworth, how would a person sign up for this?
So we're going to be pushing out a wide range of outreach and communications on this. Ultimately, the best person to contact would be Margaret Chady, our communications specialist. Margaret's name will be plastered everywhere on all the outreach materials we put out. And certainly, we're looking to get 15 or 20 people. So It's not, necessarily overly difficult to fill 15 or 20 spots. Even word of mouth will help us probably get there. But we're gonna go far and wide and make sure that we get a good, just as we did last year, a pretty good cross section of our community, different ages and backgrounds and interests and all that. I want to make sure the council's aware we're finalizing the request for proposals for a comprehensive financial sustainability strategy and master plan for Mansfield Parks and Recreation. Many thanks to Jay O'Keefe, the Director of Parks and Rec, and Jennifer Kaufman, our Senior Planner, for their help in drafting the language that's going in the scope of service, and we're going to be getting that published, hopefully, in the next day or so with Finance's help. And looking forward to seeing what responses we get from qualified interdisciplinary teams, both with expertise in Parks and Rec program planning, but also, and perhaps most importantly, financial sustainability acumen, business planning. As the council knows, the deadline for eligible businesses to apply for the rescue plan funded small business for local business assistance program was earlier this month. And the ad hoc group that reviewed applications and provided recommendations met last week. The applications were initially reviewed by Cynthia Van Zelm with the Downtown Partnership and her staff to make sure that everything was complete, and if there was some missing element, they could follow up with the business and ask for it. But I just want to express my own personal appreciation for the 5 individuals who took part in that ad hoc group and provided their feedback. Final funding decisions are still to be made, but the council should know that it certainly looks like about half of the $370,000 originally appropriated from the Rescue Plan Act to fund this will be unexpended. There will be additional funds to be made available. So we'll be mulling our options, whether we go back out with essentially the same sort of request for applications, or we look to fine tune it. Any substantive changes, though, of course, will go back before the council and get your concurrence to do that. But I still think, despite the fact that we haven't fully exhausted all the funds, it was a very successful first round. Although I would note that we received a number of inquiries, either from members of the nonprofit community or people that are interested in supporting the nonprofit community to want to know why this first grant award round did not include nonprofits. And so we kind of explained, or I tried to explain, that we had set up a separate program to fund at least social service agencies. But I think a good point of possible discussion with the council as far as how to use the unspent second half of the 370 would be, do you want to broaden it to nonprofits? So those are all things we can discuss in the future. I wanted to be sure that the council is aware that this past legislative session, a piece of legislation was passed that enables municipalities to enact a local option property tax exemption for income-qualified veterans. As laid out in my report, the household income, I believe, federal adjusted gross income threshold is a little over $50,000, and the benefit can be equal to 10% of the assessed value of the individual's primary residence. But this is a local option. Municipalities don't have to do it. There would be a whole public hearing process if the council was inclined to do it. So at some point here in the near future, I'm looking for feedback from the council about whether or not this is a process that you all would like to go through. And if it is, Finance is ready, willing, and able to work up some financial impact analysis so you can get a sense of, based on our estimated number of qualified veterans, what would the tax collection implications be. Let's see, I think just a couple more notes here. I want to make sure the council is aware that tomorrow the Human Services Advisory Committee has a special meeting to discuss the request for proposals that they're looking to draft, in part based on the feedback the council provided back in June for the one-time enhanced funding for social service agencies, the I think I will end it there right now, other than to say there's an item on the agenda tonight that we're actually going to table. The COVID pay, the premium pay for town and school district employees. Looking to table that to the next meeting for a couple of different reasons. But the primary reason is we had approached Willington as Ashford as fellow members of Region 19, the three towns that comprise Region 19. And actually late breaking today, it sounds like their interest and ability, they may actually be interested and able to participate financially in this program. And so rather than have the council act on this in a way that assumes 100% funding from the town of Mansfield, it makes sense to let this play out a little bit longer and come back in August and see if there can in fact be some financial contribution from one or either of the other member towns to help support this effort. So I will leave it there and field any questions the council may have about other items in my report.
Questions for the town manager? Mr. Coleman?
Thanks, Ryan. About how many veterans do we have in town that we could possibly help out with the tax
I have
abatement?
not had those numbers run yet. I don't.
Okay,
Happy to provide that at a future council meeting.
okay, it'd be good to know. Also, you have a piece here on the lead levels in the two new wells at Southeast School. Before I was abruptly interrupted at the last school building committee, I asked a question, and I'm going to ask the question again. There was a test done January of 2022. Okay, I'm not sure what the lead levels were at that point. Again, another test was done in June of this year. The June test actually showed rather high levels of lead. I believe they were 0.0145 out of a maximum level of 0.015 parts per billion. It is our duty to make sure our children are not exposed to any level of lead. This is not acceptable. Between January and June, we have no idea if our children were drinking, washing their hands with, or eating food that was cooked with lead water. It is your responsibility to take action on that. And I want to know if our children have been exposed to any level of lead.
Mr. Aylesworth, you wish to reply? Are you prepared to reply?
I'll reply at least in part. I want to make sure that the community is aware that the source water at the two wells, which as Mr. Coleman states, are newly drilled, newly installed wells that have been servicing, providing water to Southeast School for a portion of the past school year, as well as will be providing water to the new Mansfield Elementary School starting next fall, that the source water is being sampled to see if there is in fact any lead in the source water, so that we know whether or not there's any mitigation or remediation needed for the water that will be provided and used in the new elementary school. Experts with DEEP and Eastern Highlands Health District have all indicated that, based on their many decades of experience, that they are anticipating that there will not be any detectable or certainly actionable level of lead in the source water, but that's why we need to sample to be sure. The lead levels that Mr. Coleman is referring to, there were actionable levels of lead found at multiple sampling locations within the building, and a very close to actionable level of lead in the quote-unquote entry point. But it's important to know that the entry point is not synonymous with source water. It's closest to the source. It's where water comes into the building, but it still goes through piping to get there. And so there's still an opportunity for some contamination of some sort, or cross-contamination, or even the way that the sample was taken to have influenced the lead that was detected in the samples that were taken recently. So there's absolutely going to be sampling done to ensure that the water that is used in the new elementary school is safe for consumption. And in the low probability event that anything is discovered to be an issue, I can assure everybody that local officials will be working with, our design team, our everybody involved in the project, as well as state officials, to make sure that the situation is addressed and tended to. We continue to consult with public health, the public health community on what steps are warranted if there is in fact actionable lead levels found in the water. What steps should be taken, to your other question, Mr. Coleman, or comment about the period of time in Southeast, the old building, when children would have been potentially exposed to lead from the time that the last sample was taken to June. And all I can say at this point is I think we're awaiting the results of the follow-up sampling to determine what those next steps would be.
I hope you can take those samples soon. I don't think we should be postponing or delaying the samples. I think we should,
Yep.
expediting this.
And to be clear, I think our facilities team is following up with them on a daily basis to, do everything we can to expedite the collection of the samples.
Thank you.
Any other question for Mr. Aylesworth? Seeing none, we'll move on to reports and comments of council members. My comment is that I have been contacted by the town of Chaplin, which is planning celebrations for its 300th anniversary. Chaplin was created by breaking off land from 3 surrounding towns, and the original donation for the establishment of their church, which is the basis for that community, for that town government, was a donation from a deacon of the Mansfield Congregational Church. So I will be participating in their celebration in September. They haven't figured out what they want me to do yet, but I said I would be happy to represent the town at that event. So that is what I can think of. I will comment for people who have just joined us at 7 o'clock that we spent some time earlier this evening, and it is the celebration is recorded, honoring Peter Kotchenberger, who is leaving the town council. This will be his last meeting. He's setting off for Point South, where he will bring his wisdom, his legal knowledge, his kindness, and his expertise to the students of law students of Southern universities. So we wish him well. And if you're interested in watching it, it has been recorded. So that's all I have to say. Any other council members have comments? Mr. Osberger.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I have 2 things. One, I'd like to recognize Vera Ward Stearns, who has recently retired from planning and zoning. She had been there for close to 20 years, and so she's got to take care of her husband, who is quite old and got her hands in too many things, and he let her know. But her dedication as a secretary of zoning was unmatched. She takes great notes, and they will be sorely missed there. As when I served on zoning with her, I appreciated her candor and her willingness to stick to the issues and her professionalism. They are losing a very big asset. Secondly, later on in our packet this evening, we have some talk about the conceptual plan for the pickleball facility at the Mansfield Community Center. And of course, since I support this, I'm certainly going to vote for it. But what was really interesting is in the Sunday paper this week, Trade Magazine had on its front cover pickleball and a detail about its history and everything about it, and in sections where you can buy fancy bags and all kinds of stuff. So phenomenon is out there. I think it's all in our best interest to do this, but I thought that was interesting, seeing that, seeing as how we're doing this. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know whether Planning and Zoning is planning to honor Ms. Stearns in the future, but we will certainly stay aware of this in case it's appropriate for us to do something as well. Any other council member have reports or comments? Seeing none. Excuse me. The next item on the agenda is a consent agenda. It has a approval of minutes. It has one appointment to the Board of Ethics, which is an elevation of an alternate to a full-time position, and the long-awaited cancellation of our second meeting in August. So if there is somebody who would move the consent agenda, Mr. Shaken moves. Is there a second to the consent agenda? Mr. Osberger seconds. Any discussion on the consent agenda? All those in favor, please raise your hands. Unanimous. Thank you. We have no old business on the agenda. Under new business, the first item is our Code Red emergency communications. This is a report regarding Code Red. Mr. Aylesworth?
Yep. While our fire marshal / emergency management director, Adam Libros, gets comfortable, I'll just do a quick introduction here. So I think the council has from time to time been provided an overview of or reminder of what exactly Code Red is all about and how reverse 911 communication works and what we use it for. And so we thought this would be a good opportunity, especially since in recent days and weeks, Councilor Coleman had expressed some interest in emergency operations, and communications is obviously an important part of that. I thought it'd be a good opportunity to get Deputy Chief Libros in front of the council to provide a little bit of a refresher. So without any further ado.
Thank you. So basically the Code Red system, it's what you might know as a reverse 911 system. So we can take messages and send them out to just about every household and work telephone line in the town of Mansfield. And those numbers are basically compiled from the telephone companies. And then there's the optional opt-in from the system for the residents to apply their mobile cell phones, their email addresses, text messages, etc., so they can get that message when they're on the go. As far as the uses, we use it for just about anything you can think of as far as emergencies. It can be severe weather, it could be floods, tornado warnings, which we'll talk about a little bit further. Bad weather, winter weather. We can go into road closures, we can go into dam breaks, flooding, etc. So just about any kind of emergency message we can send out immediately. As far as the weather alerts, sometimes, as you might know, the last 5 years I've been here, we've had 2 confirmed tornadoes in town. The problem is sending out a tornado warning is we usually have about 10 or 15 minutes, and that's it, when that might actually strike town. The National Weather Service usually doesn't have a whole lot of lead time based on the radar echoes, etc. So sending out tornado warnings, and we have found out that even if I send it out immediately, some of those numbers don't get that message for up to 20 or 30 minutes later, mainly because of how many messages have to go out through the system. Something that we are researching, and something that we actually work hand in hand with the university. They have their own system called Uconn Alert. I work hand in hand with their emergency management office. So if there's a message to send out, something general like a road closure, we share that information. So if it affects students on campus and also the residents of Mansfield, we can both send out that message. As far as who can initiate emergency messages, that would be myself, the fire chief, the police sergeant, and basically any incident commander at any type of emergency. They can automatically send that right away. Typically, it's done through my office as emergency management. And we can send that message either through the computer, we can also send it right from our cell phones. Very accessible to do so. And it's pretty quick. You just type up the message, choose who we want to send to, meaning our emergency list, which is all the numbers, or just a general list of who opted into the system. As far as getting the word out for Code Red, we send out flyers to a lot of our fairs that we have in town. When we have a booth, we usually have a Code Red flyer available for people to see, to take home, and explains to them how they can opt into the system. They can register online. We also work with the university, their off-campus housing division. We go to several of their fairs on campus during the year, so we can target the students that live off campus. Most of them have already signed up for the Uconn Alert system, but most of them don't know about the Code Red system for the town. Since they live off campus, it's a benefit for them, not only for their travels, but obviously any kind of emergency in town, they should be notified about it. So that's a general overview. Take any questions?
Mr. Goldman?
Thank you. I just want to share a personal experience with you because I was an employee at Uconn and my daughter was a student at E.O. Smith. I was subscribed to both Uconn Alert, and I believe we had the Code Red service here at the time. It was 2012, in the spring of 2012. A man tried to abduct a student at gunpoint. We got the Uconn Alert to shelter in place so that everybody would keep type until they apprehended the individual. That was the end of my shift. I left to go home, and my daughter was standing on the sidewalk in front of E.O. Smith. So I was very concerned that no one at E.O. Smith got that alert. I did write the superintendent of the schools at that time of District 19. Has that been rectified? I know it's a long time ago, but I certainly wouldn't want to see that happen again.
Sir, I can't really talk about the incident that you described since I was not in office at that time. However, some type of incident like that, usually the police department or the state trooper's office would be in contact with my office. All of the emergency department heads, so myself, fire chief, me being in emergency management, and we would most likely be talking directly with the principal and the staff over at Region 19 to ensure that they receive the message or keep that line of communication open.
So you immediately get Uconn alerts?
I do receive them, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? How many people have we got on Code Red these days?
Yeah, I would say it's roughly about 8,000 contacts. And so that means at least when a person signs up, it's either, it's at least one contact for them. So I would say about 8,000 contacts is what we have in the database.
Do you have any idea what percentage of households are covered?
I don't have that information. I'll see if I can gather that through the Code Red system.
Because it would seem to me that this is a very important service for Mansfield residents, and we ought to be really encouraging people to sign up. I would really like to know how successful our program has been in terms of households covered.
And I would just maybe add on that note, Mayor, that we're putting out our August newsletter and some additional social media messaging with hurricane season being now, knowing that this was going to be on the agenda tonight. So working with our communications specialist over the next week to really push out the messaging about Code Red registration.
I can't tell you, Mayor, that I do get a lot of requests. Usually after every message I send out, I get a few requests to deactivate their numbers because usually from students who have moved on, they moved out of town, and they actually can't go into the system and remove it. I have to do that myself, so I'm able to go in and do that. So I know the message is getting out, but I don't have the figure as right now as far as how many households.
Well, I don't know whether Mr. Kotchenberger from Baton Rouge will want to get those messages, but I'll leave that up to him.
I do. I think they might be a little more frequent. Hurricanes.
Or more serious. Any other questions, Mr. Shaken?
Thanks. You had mentioned that, I think, maybe I heard you incorrectly, that with something like a tornado warning where there's almost no notice and folks generally get notice through another automated system, you're not really able to get warnings out. I have noticed sort of anecdotally that the Code Red system is very good at getting stuff that has nice forewarning and planning behind it, like Public Works planned road work, road closures out, and that those are sort of our most frequent alerts, but that there are times when other things are happening, a road closure because of an accident or some other sort of more true emergency. And just because of maybe how long it takes to get through the system, we don't necessarily get an alert about them. And so I'm just sort of curious what the threshold or protocol is. We've also had issues over the years, although maybe not so much recently, with when there has been a sort of public safety incident, the chain of communication between state police and especially the state police who are not our resident troopers, and the town sometimes gets a little interrupted, to put it nicely. And so what's the sort of protocol? Like, what rises to the level of a Code Red notification if you have more than 15 minutes like you'd have in a tornado warning to get something out to residents? Because I worry a little bit that, you know, all or almost all of the ones I can remember happening, the phone calls that I've gotten or the text messages have been about, hey, we're milling a road today and it's going to be closed, which is important information and helpful, but maybe not necessarily something I would think of as Code Red emergency.
So typically, as far as like a traffic accident or a road closure, I would say it's going to be hours at a time. Not something that we think is going to be unblocked in an hour, let's say, because like you said, as far as that time frame, once MS gets out, maybe now you only have a half hour, 20 minutes before you basically have to send another message saying that it's now unblocked and the road is open. Also, as you stated, communication, something that, you know, maybe we could look at or even improve between the trooper's office. You know, if it happens overnight, you know, I might not know immediately. So again, that's something that needs to be passed down. The other thing we always have to look at too is how many messages are we sending out? If we send out too many messages, a lot of times, and you probably have all been, you know, called by the robo caller and all that. A lot of times people see something like this pop up on their caller ID display, they might not actually pick up because it's another robocall. If we send too many messages out, then they actually might not pick it up or listen. And we also don't want to overload the system with that, you know, too much information.
And what's the sort of internal protocol when there's something that could produce, obviously you can't predict a traffic accident or a tornado or anything, but I'm thinking towards last summer when we had the significant rain event that caused sort of widespread flooding. And I remember at the time there were citizen reports, a number of them around, oh God, I just got to a road that's totally covered in water, everyone avoid this road. But there was never, we had some road closures in town, nothing like some of our neighboring towns had. So if there's an incident like that that's predictable, I know the emergency management department gets sort of activated in a snow event, but is that something that's happening in other sort of extreme weather events that we know are coming, tornadoes, or not tornadoes, hurricanes, those kinds of things where we have some more advanced warning?
I would just say that there's certainly, I wouldn't describe it as that there's a simple formula that we use, and so, you know, you kind of 2 + 2 = yes, this goes out. It's sort of discretion. Adam, myself, other people involved will have a huddle. It could be a phone call. I can think of examples where we did this last summer, as you alluded to, several of the sort of storm-related natural disaster responses and the lead up to it, but also communication we did over the past year with mass vaccination events and just making sure people were aware that, you know, their cohort was now age eligible, that they could get vaccinated. So we used it for those types of things as well. And, you know, I guess speaking for myself, the things that I look for is this is this a message of either townwide emergency interest, or if it's not townwide, is it still of an intense enough need for a subset of the town? Because you don't necessarily know what roads people drive. They might live in this part. So there are things that might seem very localized that actually do have a huge townwide impact. And so I guess the best I can say is that, I feel like we've always communicated pretty effectively, pretty timely on those things, and then kind of quickly reach a consensus on whether or not this will be a code red message.
Just to add to that, as far as like flooding goes, as Mr. Aylesworth, said, if it's a small side road, we might not look at that as something to send out a code red message about, mainly because, it's not going to be traveled like something as such as Bassett's Bridge. We know that can flood during big rain events. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, they have a direct line with me. They contact me saying, hey, we're going to close down Bassett's Bridge at this date and this time. We can then send out the message. We have done that before to let everybody know that Bassett's Bridge will be closed. Other areas that might be affected, just for an example, is Stormbush. That whole neighborhood down there gets affected by the river a lot. And we send that message, and we can send it directly just to that area. We can actually choose neighborhoods with the system as well. We don't have to necessarily send it to the entire town. And we just let them know, even though that they usually prepare pretty well in advance, just to let them know that the river is coming up.
Mr. Sherman?
I'm sure this is written somewhere, but what is the process by which somebody who wishes to have their cell phone added to this goes through? Who do they contact?
So basically, through the town website, under emergency management, there's a thing for Code Red, a link, and then that brings you to the Code Red initial screen where somebody can sign up and put their information on.
Ms. Berthelot?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. This is a really important safety feature for our town, and I know that there have been many times that I've learned about what's going on through it. So I think it's really terrific, and thank you. Couple thoughts. Obviously, the mayor's concerns about, doing whatever we can to push it out more, and I hear Mr. Aylesworth's response, and that's great. It should be sort of a regular occurrence that we're making people aware of this. And to Mr. Shakin's point, in terms of we know that there have been times that things have slipped through the cracks because of communication, and that's nothing that you can control. You need the state police to call you. There's no way for you to know unless they actually make the call. I guess I have one thought about that. I want to ask you your thoughts on how that might be improved in the future, and generally speaking, what we could be doing generally to make it a better system, whether it's more money or more resources, something along those lines. And the other thing I was thinking about is so many of us do have phones where we're on so many weather apps, so we do get the bzzz for, there's going to be a tornado. But we know that there are populations in town, largely in communities where we have older residents living. Is there a way of sort of really zeroing in on those communities to make sure that they're getting the messages?
I'll take your last part first, if you don't mind. There are certain sections of town, and a great one, for example, is the Sun communities or the old Jensen's community. I meet with them at least once a year, maybe twice a year. They have monthly meetings, and they invite me, usually in October, to speak to them about all types of emergency preparedness. And I always speak about Code Red with them. They know, especially if a tornado is coming, what do we do in a mobile home situation? So that is one of the areas that I target because mobile home, safety is a big priority for them. As far as the communication, I think it's something I can sit down with the newer resident state trooper sergeant and explain to him the possible concern or going forward if it's especially not a daytime incident and it's a nighttime incident where maybe not everybody's notified about it, is to somehow get that communication going a little bit better. I don't think it's a financial impact at all. I think it's just a communication between multiple departments.
All right, Mr. Katzenberger. And I do want to remind people there are a number of things on our agenda, so we should move along. I don't mean to do this to you on your last day. Go ahead.
It's Peter's last hurrah, so we'll excuse him.
So as I was saying, going back to 20 years ago, I'd like to repeat, thank you for the presentation. It is helpful. And one thing, and this is, I can follow this up with an email, when you mentioned that there'd be communications to residents regarding the hurricane season, things like that, please, I think it's essential to remind people that, because this happens every storm, everywhere in the country, that your homeowner's insurance and your renter's insurance does not cover flood. It doesn't. It's rare exceptions. And I don't know how many thousands there's many, many thousands of lawsuits that are filed every year on this issue. There's not a town in Mansfield that does not have flood zones. It is, yes, if you live on the shore nearby, you need flood insurance. But a flood is not defined by insurance policy as a hurricane that can create a flood-like condition. It's overflow of water often. So, and after every storm, there's always a large percentage of people who just didn't realize that. So this communication, I think, would be useful, and the Connecticut Insurance Department has a lot of information on that. I'll provide the link if you want to use that as well. You may already be doing it, but it's a shame when this happens, and it happens again constantly. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Mr. Aylesworth?
Just one more quick word here, because I think this relates back to a theme that's come up in the conversation a couple times about how do I subscribe? So it comes back to how do I access the information? How do I get on a list? And I just want to say, I know the council's aware of this because you approved money in this year's capital plan for it, but using this as an example, we are looking to do a pretty significant, substantial overhaul of the town website so that information such as being able to subscribe to Code Red, it's not that we're ever trying to bury the information. We've organized it in a way historically that maybe worked at a time, but as Deputy Chief Libro said, you have to go through emergency management to find this, and while that might work for a municipal employee in the way our brains work, oh yes, of course, I'm going to go through the emergency management page now, that's not necessarily how the average member of the public thinks of it. So we want to make it a lot easier through a number of different means. All roads kind of lead to the same place to find what you're looking for, and so just to use this as an example of one of the things that we're looking to make a lot easier to find on a revamped version of the website.
Thank you. Mr. Osberger, followed by Mr. Coleman.
Just briefly, to what Ryan had just said with regard to people accessing this product, a good example, which Terry touched on, was our elderly. If they don't have a computer, they really can't sign up. So what do? Have to call the town to get some sort of notifications?
So we still get that quite often. People call our office directly, and we can input it into the computer directly for them.
Okay, very good, thanks.
And that's the Office of Emergency Management. Thank you. Mr. Coleman.
I just want to make a comment. Not all tornadoes come with warnings. I had one go by my house within 100 yards of my house. There was no call for severe weather. There was no radar image of a tornado. So not everything comes with warnings. Just be prepared.
Thank you. I want to comment that I have recently learned that every emergency notice that goes out over the Code Red system in New Haven is spoken directly by the mayor. So I will yield to department heads and the town manager, whoever is appropriate in issuing these warnings. Okay, are we ready to move on from this topic? Thank you very much, Adam. The next item is the conceptual plan for pickleball. Mr. Aylesworth, would you like to introduce Mr. Taylor and
Mr. Taylor and Son approach the guest table. While they're coming up, the council's already provided some information on this. I believe it was the June 27th meeting that some initial outreach or information was provided on Mr. Taylor's very generous offer to help underwrite the cost of a pickleball facility in the town of Mansfield. So I won't recoup everything that was already, cover everything that was already shared at that meeting, other than to say we've continued at the staff level, as well as with our town attorney. I've had a number of follow-up conversations with Mr. Taylor. We've, basically been focusing on trying to arrive at a site plan or a conceptual plan that we think works. And while I'm talking, I will do a share screen here so as to pull up what it is I'm talking about. So here it is. This is, I'll show you two different views of this. This is what you might call a more global view of the town hall / community center kind of campus. And on the community center parcel, kind of the southwestern quadrant, if you will, this is where the pickleball facility, which is, in this case, we're proposing a series of 6 courts, 4 of which I believe you just call recreational dimension courts, 2 of which are the competition dimension. So the 2 here on the top would be competition dimension, and the 4 recreational courts down here, and area for spectator seating kind of in between, and access is shown on this map as well, or this conceptual plan. And I'll just do a quick, tighter view of this same area, just to give people a better sense of what we're talking about. So we looked at a number of different locations. We talked about a number of different areas throughout town, but as I think I said at the last meeting, we really started to zero in on the community center for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is the walkability, the proximity to Uconn, to the downtown, to the senior center, to a variety of different facilities and stakeholders. It seemed that the downtown stores area and the community center parcel made a great deal of sense. And then within that parcel, we looked at a number of different options as well, in terms of adjacency to the skate park, adjacency to the playground, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's a lot to like about a number of different options. But what you have in front of you in this particular location is where staff, and I want to thank our Assistant Town Engineer, Derek DeLay, in particular, because he's really been doing the legwork, preparing these different conceptual plans, if you will, as well as looking at preliminary project budgets. And so this is a location that staff and would-be users and Mr. Taylor, I think, are all in support of. So we think we have the best location here. And basically, with your support, we're looking to take this to the next stage, which is to drill down into more detail and kind of finalize what a donation agreement would look like between Mr. Taylor and the town. Obviously, the town attorney would be consulted with heavily on the crafting of that to make sure everybody's interests were protected, and to make sure that the roles and responsibilities of the parties were understood, and that the ultimate deliverables, the quality of the final product and all that was, sort of commemorated and documented in writing. Last word I'll say before turning things over to our guests is just that in recent conversations, Mr. Taylor has approached the town, or has suggested that it would be appropriate for the town to contribute monetarily toward the project, in particular when it comes to some of the site work. And there's approximately $120,000, $130,000 we estimate combined, and it's a number of different sort of aspects within the broader category of site work, but about $120,000 or $130,000 worth of work to be done. The overall project budget is substantially larger, so Mr. Taylor and any other private donors that he's able to recruit would certainly be bearing the lion's share of the cost. But Mr. Taylor has, approached the town about its receptivity to providing some financial match. And, we can eventually talk about where that would come from, but certainly some of the money that we've earmarked in the American Rescue Plan specifically for Parks and Recreation asset improvements, that $750,000 that the council's already conditionally approved, that would be a logical source for a subset of this project cost.
Before you do that, I have a procedural question.
Mhm.
There's no proposed motion in the packet. There will have to be one at some point because we are allocating funds.
Correct.
So what you are looking for tonight is just a sense of, do we want this to continue?
That's exactly right. Rather than go through the process of having the town attorney work, with the private donor in this case, or private parties in this case, to craft an agreement and potentially expend a lot of time and effort in something that didn't bear fruit if it wasn't the direction you guys wanted to go, we thought this was a good time just to quickly check in with the council again, show the actual concept. I mean, there might be some minor changes within this scheme, but this is basically what's being proposed, and make sure that the council's fully on board with this vision. And then, likely at the next meeting, in fact, almost certainly at the next meeting, we would come back to you with, the legal instrument as crafted by the town attorney, looking for a vote by the town council to authorize me to enter into the agreement with the parties.
Okay, well, Mr. Taylor.
Michael Taylor, 12 Stone Mill Road and Stores. A couple of quick things. First of all, the idea of 2 competitive courts and 4 recreational courts, the courts themselves, layout, lines, are
Mr.
exactly
Taylor,
the
I
same.
don't think you're being
Oh.
picked up. You need to be right at the mic.
Okay.
Thank you.
The difference isn't at all in the size of the court. The competitive level courts just give a little more side room and depth, so perhaps maybe in competition they're working and running a lot harder. But either court can be played on, but I guess when you get to competition level, they want to give a little more room for okay, that's it. And
For chasing the ball was the comment,
I,
yes.
I would like to, I would have liked to do the whole thing. I saw parts of this that I thought were parking area, sidewalks, stuff like that. I thought that was more something for the town to take care of for a lot of reasons. And of course, we went from 4 to 6 courts here, so I think it's a much better plan than the original one. It's going to run more money at this end, but I think the product is better. So, and it's moving along nicely. I'm happy with that. You can read Town Manager Ellsworth's summary. We've been working with Attorney Deneen, Jay O'Keefe, and especially Town Engineer Derek DeLay, who's put a lot of effort into this and come up with what I think is a much better plan. To Councilman Osberger's, I think that this is fascinating. This week's July 25th, New Yorker, the lead story is pickleball. Surprisingly egalitarian culture. Talks about children, parents, and grandparents all getting together. It talks about rich and poor. It talks about conservative Democrats and liberal Republicans all getting together.
Draws a lot of parallels. That probably the best news.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I sent him the article.
That's right. There's a part of it about Hartford. It's having, anyway, to see this week ahead of this meeting, I think says everything. Said, I think it's a coincidence that I find intriguing.
Well, Mansfield is truly blessed by having a number of very public-spirited people who have put their resources to the town's best interest. And I must say that, speaking for myself, I am very grateful for your interest in doing this. We do need to get a sense from the council of whether you support continuation of this. Mr. Osberger, followed by Ms. Berthelot.
Yes. For someone who has both competed and run tournaments, I would make a suggestion that you make all the courts tournament level. And in the case that at some point you may end up being a host site for such a situation, in which case, if only 2/6 of the court are available for tournament level stuff, well, let's just put it this way. I know that when I've been at tournaments and you get there at 8 o'clock in the morning and then you're there till 11 o'clock at night at the tail end of the tournament, you're pretty bushed. And the idea is that you want to be able to offer a facility, I would say, that would move the competition along, move the tournament along. And in doing so, I think you would want to have all of the courts doing that. And it probably would only take a few more things. And I would imagine people would come and say, why didn't they just do it the first time when they're already building it? It just would make sense to me that we would just do them all the same way. But that's just merely a suggestion. Harry?
Can I address that briefly? The site as it's set up now also suited to expansion. As far as expanding the 4 courts, which means I think an extra 4 feet on either side, so that would be 32 feet. We don't have the room for that, but this site was picked because it can be extended should this sport become what it can be. And by the way, it's been brought to the University of Connecticut's attention that it's contiguous, and should they get involved, which frankly I've been pushing. For those 4 courts to be expanded, you'd lose one of the courts.
I see.
To expand eventually, then there's unlimited extra land, particularly if the university jumps in on it.
Thank you. Ms. Berthelot?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for this. It does seem like we have serendipity in suggesting that this is all a good idea. I certainly know everybody who plays is obsessed immediately. My only concern is, in terms of location, is when we had our initial discussion with the folks who are doing the facilities study, that this part of town was what they were pushing in terms of future development. They were talking about the senior center, which I hope we can be broader than a senior center, that we won't be ageist, that we will think about things more globally. But that all said, does it make sense to be building other things here now when this is super important? Totally want to go forward, but in the same breath, this real estate is particularly valuable.
Yeah, so I'd be happy to speak to that a little bit. And I don't want to steal, I guess, necessarily all the thunder, what you'll see in the August presentation, but I can say that this this conceptual plan, has been shared with our architecture firm. So everything that's sort of the leading candidate in terms of recommendations as far as the facility study goes with the presentation that the town council will hear in August, I can say all of this has been vetted and none of this interferes with those plans. I think it's very thoughtfully kind of put in places to avoid that. And the other thing it maintains, which is separate from the facilities needs assessment, but I think has been talked about and kind of planned for over the years, as I understand it, there's been thought of connecting the 2 parking lots in some way with a driveway, some sort of access. Because right now, you know, when you come in here, you dead end at the playground or you dead end at the skate park, and you know, it's difficult to get from A to B. So there's been discussion about maintaining 2 different ways, and Derek Delay, our assistant engineer, has sort of mock-ups of that if the council is interested. 2 different ways to maintain that possible access in the future. You don't have to do it at all, but a couple of the options we looked at, or at least one of the options I should say that we looked at in terms of citing the courts, one of the downfalls of that particular option, and I'll say it's the option that would have had the courts in between the skate park and the playground. While there's certain things to like about that location, one of the concerns was it really just torpedoes this loop road option in the future. And so putting this where we've proposed to put it preserves more options, but to your original point, does not interfere with anything that's being planned either for town hall or other community services that you alluded to.
Mr. Shaken.
Thanks. Sort of similar line of questioning, which is just, I think, an encouragement on my part to make sure that as we are thinking about this parcel in particular, it's being the town hall and the community center, but also E.O. Smith next door and the open space that exists right now, that as we come up with all the different ideas, especially if we're going to be eventually replacing this building and potentially consolidating functions with the senior center in this, on this parcel, that we just don't sort of foreclose ourselves to other things that are recreational. There was a suggestion on Facebook the other day of wouldn't an outdoor swim area or splash pad or both be a really cool thing to have, and maintaining room for something like that on the recreation parcel, if you will, rather than throwing it in one of our other parts of town might be good. I have a specific question about these courts in particular, which is recognizing the popularity of pickleball right now and sort of eyeballing how it looks like these plans fit in with where the tennis courts are. Is there other things that if pickleball fell out of favor in 15 years and no one was playing anymore that we could use the space for? How many basketball courts could you fit into this paved area? Tennis courts. I know paddle tennis is also popular and has a slightly different sized court, that kind of thing. Have there been any thought about if you know, when we do this, if people don't use the pickleball anymore at some period of time and we have this land developed, could it easily be turned into something else that people would want to use? Or are these dimensions sort of what they are, and we'll have to use it for pickleball no matter what?
I can say that myself and our Director of Parks and Recreation have had some discussions about that. I don't know, not to put Jay on the spot, I don't know if he could rattle off his head exactly alternative uses now. I would say that that's a very reasonable question that perhaps before any final action is taken by the council at the next meeting, maybe we could provide a kind of a list out based on the dimensions. And like you're saying, I mean, I think it's probably low probability that for the foreseeable future that demand will wane. But if it does, what other uses could those services be used for? I think that's a reasonable question. Unless Jay, actually, I mean, I don't want to. If you have thoughts that you want to share, feel free to come up now and speak to it. But
If I may add very quickly, it's actually a reverse situation. What we tried to do originally is find repurposable tennis courts, because you can take a tennis court and break that down. As far as going the other way, don't have an answer for that.
Thanks. And just one follow-up, just looking at this map in a broader sense and having at one point brought tennis rackets to the playground at the community center with the hope of getting a tennis ball at the E.O. Smith courts, it would be really great if we could have a little bit more of a collaborative partnership with the region, because those courts are, in my experience, always padlocked, and there are 7 of them. So I got in the car and drove to Sunny Acres, which was, as far as I know, the only non-padlocked tennis court in the town. But if we're going to be thinking about recreation in a new way as part of our master plan, which I think we are, having those courts be available for public use, obviously reserved for high school sports when needed, as this community center pool is, it would be really great.
I would just say that frustration is expressed by a number of people who have gone to use the courts and found them locked when they shouldn't have been.
Thank you. Mr. Osberger.
Right, I see that we've kind of shoehorned the courts down in the southwestern corner of the lot. What if we were to put them in the northwestern corner of the lot? Does that afford more space? And could that cover covered my question of making them all tournament courts?
So the northwestern corner was explored, and Derek Delai did produce a mock-up of that area. If memory serves, the deeper into the parcel you get, the more and more rock and ledge you encounter. I think the only way, I mean, obviously with infinite funds and infinite, dynamite or whatever, you could do anything you wanted. But realistically, the amount of ledge that's there, we were looking at a perched option where there's a retaining wall, and I can't remember how many feet, but many feet above essentially the skate park. And so you'd be kind of looking down on it. I'm trying to recreate in my mind the reasons why that was less preferable to this, but I know that talking with the stakeholders and talking with Derek, consensus was that this was a better location for a variety of reasons. I do want to say, just real quick, back on something the deputy mayor said about potentially outdoor aquatic space, whether it be a splash pad or something else, that absolutely was a part of this conversation, and that actually was part of the reason why this particular corner of the parcel, as opposed to some of the space closer to the actual community center, we shy away from. In addition to the access that I described, preserving a splash pad option was definitely part of the thinking. But I don't know if you want to circle back on any of the comments. I'm trying to recreate the discussion about why that northwestern corner doesn't work so well.
I guess it had to do with the ledge and the accessibility. Yeah.
I know that these discussions have been ongoing with some intensity for a period of time, and I would assume that any question about location that we come up with at this point has been thoroughly explored already. Mr. Bruder.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to voice my support for this project. I know that I've been watching a lot of people play pickleball in the community center during their hours. I've had a chance to play on a clay court. Obviously, having something set in town would be amazing. I think it's very phenomenal that stepping up and you have my support in the way everything's going right now, and trying to clear that off so that we can have fun outside with it.
I do want to say, it may seem that that's just a concept, but Derek Delai went through, was it 6 or 8 different iterations? Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good, I think there were 6 that I can recall that he actually worked up on a paper. I think there were others that were discussed that were kind of quickly deep 6, but a lot of different angles were looked at.
One of the principal reasons I like this area, because this solidifies our community. To put this down, say, in Lionsfield, and I'm sure the people there would be very hospitable to such a use, but that's not my idea here. This is community, and again, there's an awful lot of ledge along. Seriously, again, Derek, my original idea was where splash pad between the children's park and the skateboard park, which is a perfect size for 4 courts. Perfect. But did interfere with some other growth potential, although not specifically identified. There were just so many other possibilities and interferences, whereas this corner is autonomous to the degree that plus to get the 2 extra courts made a bit. But solidifying our community means homogenizing facilities.
Okay, to move this forward, I would like to know, is there any council member who would like this discussion with Kevin and with the donor and with the town to come to an end? No. Okay. So generally speaking, I would say that the council supports this proposal, and we wish you the best of luck in figuring out how to do it. And we are really grateful for your efforts to bring this to the town.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
How do I turn it?
So now, the next item on our agenda is pandemic premium play, which, Mr. Shaken,
I'll move to table this until our next meeting.
is there a second? Mr. Bruder seconds. All those in favor of tabling, please raise your hand. Motion to table's been adopted unanimously. The next item on our agenda is appointment to standing council committees. With Mr. Katzenberger's leaving the council, there were some positions to fill. I have had discussions with council members, and I'm going to recommend the following appointments. Mr. Shaken to chair finance. Ms. Berthelot to move to the finance committee. Mr. Bruder to chair the committee on committees. And a new counselor, whoever he or she may be, to be a member of the committee on committees, which is our tradition for new council members. You have to get your feet wet in the committee on committees. It helps you to understand the work of the council and the town, and it also gives us an opportunity to draw on a new set of potential volunteers, as well as the new council member opportunity to learn on the ground. So without any objection, I will make those appointments. These appointments are the mayor's to make. Mr. Osberger.
I would just merely make a suggestion that Mr. Frattoni, being a CPA, would probably be a better person for the chair of the finance department.
I don't think Mr. Frattoni really wants to be the chair. Mr. Frattoni has contacted me and said that he has a recent change in jobs which will make him more available to the council, which I think is very good news. You'll still have trouble with tax season, but he will be more available. And as I said, that's good news. Okay, the next item is the town clerk office update. Ms. Chain. As usual, you are very well prepared for this presentation, so.
Thank you. I'm glad it goes. Started it yet.
Yes, but it's in our packet.
Vote of confidence. Okay.
Just before you start, just to
Okay.
orient everybody, I guess, real quick, the council, we've made a habit, at least in the almost 2 years I've been here, of not necessarily strictly on a monthly basis, but somewhere around a monthly frequency, trying to arrange for a department sort of global update, if you will, an update from each department to check in with the council and remind the council what it is that department does, what programs and services it provides, but also, what its priorities are for the next year or so, and that obviously factors in to an extent with things like goal setting that the council will do. If you're more familiar with the work of the department, you might identify as a priority of the council to help facilitate an improvement in some areas. So Sarah Ann, I know, I think about a year ago, came before you and provided an update very much like the one you're going to receive tonight. So this is the latest check-in. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. So my name is Sarah Ann Chain. I'm the town clerk. One of the things that town clerks often struggle with is explaining succinctly what it is that we do. And after 5 years in this position, I've really resigned myself that there is no succinct way to describe what we do. So if you bear with me and give you as short of an overview as possible what a town clerk does. First of all, in Connecticut, there are 591 statutes that dictate and affect the work that we do. Some examples of our work: we are the filing office and basically the government librarians for documents such as land records, which include your deeds and mortgages, liens, and things like that. Birth, death, and marriage records, referred to as vital records, are filed in our office. Veteran discharge papers, are your DD 214s. Committee, board agendas, minutes, meeting schedules, membership lists, and terms are all filed and kept in our office. And it's a couple of photos up here. Here's an example of an old record book, 1726, and this is our vault today and some of our shelving that houses our over 300-year records. We are also the program administrators for the absentee ballot program. You'll see to the right, we've got a photo of our drop box for the absentee ballot program. We administer the dog licensing program. We administer the records management program for the town, and we handle all of the freedom of information requests that come through. So we are the first point of contact for people who submit an FOI request. We help them figure out exactly what it is they're asking for, what they need, and we are the point person between the requester and the other staff throughout the town. We offer notary services, fishing and hunting licenses through DEEP, and I staff the town council, committee on committees, the cemetery advisory board, and Monica Ferreira and our office staffs the human rights. And then in the upper right-hand corner, we have another area of the vault where there are town records from all throughout the organization. People rely on our space for storing records that we are allowed or not allowed to dispose of or need to hold on to. And photo here is our front desk area. Before I move on. So our customers, we have very many, all kinds of customers. This word cloud is to illustrate that. So from exhausted parents coming in to get birth certificates for their new babies, happy couples usually coming in to get marriage certificates, title searchers, town staff, funeral directors, grieving families coming to get death certificates, voters, researchers, veterans, dog parents for licensing, or selected officials, and students from University of Connecticut, both in journalism and real estate law, come to see us as well to get familiar with the resources they can get from us. So these are our internally developed values. Our 4 values: records accessibility, records preservation, outstanding customer service, and knowledge. So for records accessibility, to that end, organization, accuracy, and thoroughness are essential for being able to locate and access the records that we care for. In caring for our records preservation is very important, so we follow the best practices in preserving those records to make sure that that documented history of the town is protected. Outstanding customer service, we hold ourselves to a very high degree of customer service, so we are friendly, helpful, professional, efficient, respectful, resourceful, responsive, and graceful under pressure, of which it is a roller coaster ride at times. And knowledge, we are very supportive of a learning environment and of professional development. So performance highlights from this past fiscal year, and all of our performance measurements are linked directly to our 4 value areas. So some select pieces, we backfiled 1,301 land records. Our target is 450 for a given fiscal year, so this is very good. Backfiling is the digitizing and indexing of our hard copy historical records. So while many of our more recent records are indexed and available digitally, our full collection, though close to it, is not fully digitized and indexed electronically. 290 survey maps were backfiled this past fiscal year. Our target is 200 in a year. 469 vital and DD-214. These are historical records backfiled. Our target is 50. And cumulatively throughout the office, we attended 18 professional development, either conferences, workshops, training activities. Our target is 12, and that's 4 for each.
Sarah Ann, I'm curious that you outperformed your own target numbers. Did that, was that because of the fact the office was closed for much of the time, or, I mean, what contributed to that real success?
Yeah, so, two things. First, it was closed for some of the time, but not much of it. So that certainly does contribute to it. However, I will say that the performance measurements that I developed are still, in my opinion, in their infancy. We're only in our second 2.5 years of doing this. So figure in the first year was largely during the pandemic. So I'm still working on getting a clear picture on what's an acceptable target. I will want to wait for another year of data before I'm sure if we need to raise our.
Just to add, I think it was late May, right, of 2021 when we reopened Town Hall. So actually,
So it
this
is
entire
4 years.
fiscal year
Mm.
Town Hall was open.
Yeah. So
Second question, once a paper document has been digitized, what happens to the paper document?
in the state of Connecticut, we must keep all of our land records. There are states where they don't require the archiving hard copy. Connecticut is not one of them. I personally hope that changes at some point. It would be nice to modernize that, but for the time being, we must provide vault space and archive all of these hard copy. So yeah, it doesn't. These are not the types of records that we can request disposal of. We
Right.
must keep.
Well, they are historically important and interesting, I must say.
Yes, the historical ones are.
Mr. Katchenberger?
I just wanted to follow up on that. You may have said this, Sarah, and I didn't pick it up. Just how far back, or what percentage of land records, going back to the beginning of the town, have been digitalized?
I don't have the percentage as of today, but soon 100%
Wow.
of our land records will be. So will be digitized, and I'll talk about it in a little bit, but we have a new software that allow someone to search those digital records by using images of the existing indexes, so that prevents us from having to spend staff time keying in all the index information. So soon we'll have them all.
That's great, and that's all
Yeah.
will be publicly available.
The land records, yes.
Land records.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. More performance highlights from this past fiscal year. Sample professional development activities include cybersecurity awareness trainings, public service in the 21st century, professional communications, records retention, training on the new electronic death registry system through the state, and civility in practice. Some additional achievements include our new online dog licensing option. The online index books software, which I just referenced to Kotchenberger, that was launched for our historical record search. So there are already some number of historical land records available on that, and within the next month or two, the balance of all of them from 1702. It's the early 1900s or late 1800s will be that online book software. Also available for free online. Updated and distributed our records disposal procedure. That's for town-wide. Digital Historical Vital Records Index was created and posted online. So this allows people who are doing genealogical research for records that are 100 years and older, be able to look online to see what records we have. This oftentimes is all that they need to put pieces of the puzzle together that they're working on. And all staff now in our office have completed the Connecticut Town Clerk Certification Program. We are all fully certified. It takes 2.5 years to do that. Great to have a full complement of certified staff now. All right. And final performance highlights fiscal year 2022. Customer service being as important to us as it is, we have a survey that is attached to all of our emails, survey link. We get responses to that periodically. So that survey, first question is, how do you feel about your most recent customer service experience with the Mansfield Town Clerk's office? As you can see, we rate very high and the very satisfied. I can remember each and every one of the two very dissatisfied and the dissatisfied customers. They are few and far between, but they didn't like that they were doing something they weren't supposed to do, unfortunately. And sometimes we have to give people news they don't want to hear. And then please tell us more feedback about what went well and what could have been better. Supports our ongoing commitment to excellence. These are some choice entries from people. Outstanding service, very helpful. Really went the extra mile for me. So patient in explaining every question I asked. So professional too. Excellent service provided by friendly staff. Extremely responsive and helpful. So kind and easy to talk to. Answered all my questions promptly and clearly. Very thorough and pleasant to do business with. Several of these words that you'll notice here that are in our values. So tracking well. And then finally, our ongoing initiatives, modernization of services, our webpage. We are chipping away at each of our associated pages, updating the language and the usability of those. And we have a number of digital forms rather that we are working to digitize as well. And online land record filing is also on our list of things to do. We get in place this upcoming year so that businesses that want to file land records, called e-recording. Digital replication of records. We want to digitize our entire collection of land, which we're almost there, vital and military records. And increased records accessibility, online access to complete land record survey map collection, and online access to committee charges, membership, and terms. This last one is actually a whole software piece that we have contracted with, I believe, a couple of years ago. The build-out process is quite voluminous, more than I had originally anticipated, so that is taking some time. Becoming. Questions?
Questions for Ms. Chang? Mr. Ainsworth?
I was just going to comment, one of the things that Sarah Ann didn't necessarily touch on that I think I see in a, maybe not daily basis, but certainly with some frequency is the number of people who aren't necessarily sure where the responsibilities of the town clerk's office begin and ends and where the registrars of voters begin and end. And I just want to say, obviously they're physically kind of adjacent to one another, but they have a very, I think, close, effective working partnership, open lines of communication, and very helpful, facilitating or sending people to the right resource, wherever the case may be.
Mr. Shagan?
I just wanted to comment that I've had to, as I've been in the process of trying to buy a house, had to contact a number of town staff over the last 6 or 7 months with questions about land and other things. And I want to thank Sarah Ann and the clerk's office for helping to steer me through the online digital records stuff. It can be a little bit complicated because it's all deeds and contracts, but it was very helpful, and I very easily got the information that I needed without having to come to town hall. So thank you. It was great.
Any further questions or comments? My own experiences have been that the staff at the town clerk's office are really helpful, and I got that even secondhand. So it wasn't just me. All right, well, thank you very much, Ms. Chain, and thank you for you and your staff's very hard work and valued work for the community. The next item is the proposed revised charge for the Mansfield Advocates for Children, or known as MAC. This comes to us from the Committee on Committees. Ms. Berthelot.
I was so entranced by Sarah Ann's that I was looking at the webpage for the town clerk, which looks great, by the way. I love the photograph.
Thank you.
Which took me off of our agenda page. So I'll start by saying that the charge for the Mansfield Advocates for Children was really out of date and was not consistent with some of their implementing some of the Connecticut statutes that require us to have the particular program. So we've been Sarah, who staffs the committee, worked very hard on creating a charge, which you'll see at page 35 of our agenda. And I don't think it's worth me sort of reading through it, and other than to say that a lot of the language is coming from the statute. And to answer any questions if anybody has them.
Ms. Berthelot, since this comes from the committee, why don't you just make a motion to adopt the proposed change to the charge for the Mansfield Advocates as included in the agenda for tonight's meeting, rather than reading the whole thing, and then we can proceed to questions?
Or,
And since it's a committee recommendation, it doesn't require a second.
right, I don't see a motion.
Well,
Is it-
it's on page 35, and it says.
Yep, I got it.
move.
Okay. Move to adopt the following resolution.
But I would just say the resolution
As written. And
questions on the motion. Questions, Mr. Bruder?
I didn't have so much of a question, but I just wanted to reiterate that this did go through multiple drafts, and a lot of time and attention was put into it. I know at first glance, for people who haven't been necessarily coming to all and every single Committee on Committees meeting, it looks a little lengthy, but as my colleague Chair has pointed out, this is language pulled directly from the statute. We really did look to try to make it as condensed as possible, but at the same time following the rules as to what the state law required us to do. And luckily we have a really active, it sounds like, group in Mansfield, and so our job had been made a lot easier just in terms of membership and that sort of thing. So hopefully we can all come together and pass this motion.
My recollection is this is one of the few committees where you have to turn people down who want to serve on it.
this is a very active committee, and,
Yeah.
and over the years, they've done some really good things for the town, including just creating community, which is when, for young families with children, that's a real key thing.
Any further comments or questions on the motion? Ms. Chang, will you note that Mr. Shaken has temporarily stepped out of the room? So we're ready to vote? All those in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. It is unanimous with the exception of a temporarily absent Mr. Shaken. The next item is a proposed Committee on Committees charge. Ms. Berthelot again.
Yes, this is me again. Okay, so this one, there was no charge. and we've worked on a charge. I will say that the most radical thing proposed here may be inconsistent with the town charter. So I want to point that out. I asked Sarah Ann to include the language from the town charter, which she so kindly did on page 39, which says that the council shall appoint, oversee, and terminate all boards, commissions, and committees. Again, that's the council shall appoint, oversee, and terminate all boards, commissions, and committees. You'll see that what we at the committee want to do, what happens now is it's a very cumbersome process to volunteer. And it means being being interviewed by the Committee on Committees. And then there's a vote. And then it goes in front of the full town council where there's another vote. And we'd like to streamline that. We'd like the Committee on Committee to be the final vote. Now, in reading this, you all might decide, it's a reasonable position, that that's not allowable. I'm going to argue, for the sake of argument, because that's what I do, that the town council it doesn't say the whole town council must appoint, that we are part of the town council, that the whole town council can delegate to us the appointment of folks to these positions. And that's simply to make it an easier process, that when folks are done with one meeting, they know that they've been appointed. So I leave that out for debate. The problem being that one could easily read this to be inconsistent with our charter.
There are two ways to go about this. One of them is to have a discussion, and if the council if it seems like the direction of the council is to oppose this, you can withdraw it. The second way is to put the motion in front of us, and if people aren't happy with it, it can be amended or defeated. What is the council's preference on this? Nobody has a preference. Okay, well, let's talk about the potential for a conflict with the charter first. And Mr. Deneen has also pointed this out. Am I correct?
It was actually Sarah Ann's diligence to run it by him. You can clearly read it to say that the council shall appoint. In the same breath, though, it doesn't say the whole council has to appoint, and it doesn't say the council can delegate to do this.
Would it be possible to write it so that the committee recommends and the council accepts or denies the recommendation?
But it still requires the next meeting. So I'm trying to that's what we do now. We make the recommendation, and then these days, we don't even talk about it. It's on the, it's part of the consent agenda. So it's really just putting people through another month of not being part of a committee that they're trying to volunteer for.
Well, my recommendation is a middle road thing, and that is that you make the recommendation for appointment, and they serve. The term begins from the recommendation, and the council has the opportunity to accept or deny. And it would just allow the person to start to serve. But if nobody's excited about that, I'll withhold it. Mr. Aylesworth.
I just want to point out, as has already been pointed out, Attorney Deneen did chime in, relatively perfunctorily, whatever the right term is, with an email saying this does appear potentially to be in conflict with the charter. So that said, That's not quite the same thing as a formal request of Attorney Deneen to consult pertinent case law and reach a determination he could put in writing. I think that it might be worthwhile to have him do that. That's sort of his knee-jerk reaction, which I think, as you said, a reasonable, saying if Attorney Deneen, so the language, so Ms.
I just
Berth.
didn't know his knee-jerk reaction, I'm sorry.
Well, no, in an email, he said, he just read the charter, sort of using the language on its face, which suggests that the full council makes appointments. And the sort of, there's this rational lens that we're applying. Well, this is a subset of the council, so it's not that the council isn't doing it. It's by, what is the definition of the council? Does it mean the full body, or could it be a subset, with those powers provided? While that was Attorney Deneen's sort of, I said knee-jerk, that's probably not the right word, but that was his initial kind of thought. I'm not sure, with the benefit of a little time and research, if he was tasked with doing that, he would necessarily reach that determination. He very well may, but it might be worth, rather than, I guess, compromise language that maybe nobody's satisfied with, if it just makes sense to have Attorney Deneen do that first.
Mr. Bruder, followed by Mr. Shuren, followed by Mr. Osberger, followed by Mr. Katzenberger. Let's see if we can remember that order.
I'm in favor of taking Ryan's suggestion of trying to have the town attorney do a more in-depth review. I agree, having been on the committee on committees, that trying to get people, volunteers, directly into their respectful boards or committees would definitely benefit, and I think encourage more participation. But I just want to make sure that we have all our T's crossed and I's dotted.
Mr. Shuren?
So as things happen now, the Committee on Committees will present something to the council, which would, in our recent custom, be appearing usually on the consent agenda. And that takes place typically 2 weeks after the Committee on Committees have voted.
It depends. But there's a lag time
Yeah.
before they go from being at one meeting, sitting through it, and then having to wait for another whole meeting to know whether or not they've been appointed.
I mean, my own feeling is that we've been operating in a very congenial way here for the past more than a year. It's been very positive. But the idea of essentially 2 members of the council being able to make appointments and letting it stop at that point is a little bit concerning to me.
Well, it was 3, and it's I mean, and it's a committee that's always been worked well together, and it's never been partisan. So I wouldn't
There
expect.
have been times when there have been partisan disagreements, however.
Yeah, but the same ratio comes back to in terms of who's in the minority party is at the larger council too. So the vote, if we were going down party lines, we'd have the same problem for the whole committee.
Might not just be party lines, though.
Yeah. Mr. Osberger, followed by Mr. Katzenberger.
Well, I would say to Gary's point, train of thought within her thoughts there. We are already making the decision, but then as a whole, of course, the language doesn't say the council as a whole. But in the situation where, say, for instance, coming up, where we're not going to have a meeting on the 22nd of August, now that stretches out that period even further. And I understand Mr. Shuren's concerns. However, in the scope of trying to streamline the process, obviously, certainly this, it's a volunteer position, and should we really stretch out the approval process much further? I think between the 3 of us, we are pretty good at vetting out a potential person. To your point, Mayor, with regard to putting them in the position and then approving them or not afterwards, I think that kind of puts the cart before the horse, in that we put them in the position and then we say, for instance, we decide that we're not going to accept them. It seems a little awkward.
I withdraw the suggestion on better thinking. Mr. Katzenberger, followed by Mr. Shaken.
I didn't think it was a bad suggestion, but anyways, withdrawn. It doesn't certainly solve completely the potential of what a point means. But one thing that could be added to the charge, which we can amend, is under charge, as authorized by the town council, the committee makes appointments. I mean, so we have the authority. We are currently delegating it to the Committee on Committees, which is a common thing to delegate various actions and procedures. I don't think that completely solves it. I'm not against asking for an opinion, but it does go some way to do.
Mr. Shaken.
Thanks. A couple thoughts. This is the Peter Kotchenberger Memorial Committee on Committees process. And when I joined the council, Peter was chair, and we didn't interview people, and I guess the Sarah and Jane Town Clerk process as well. We didn't interview people, and we sort of set new policy where the committee actually brought everyone in for an interview, and then when I chaired it, when David Freudman was on the committee, there were a number of discussions about potential appointees and their political viewpoints and some opposition. I am in favor of what Sam is saying. I think if Kevin has identified a potential conflict with the charter, then we owe it to the town to get some more information from Kevin before we vote on something that may be in conflict with the charter. I don't favor doing something that would be in conflict with the charter, but I think we should get some more information. I will say, just sort of on the surface, personally, I've been on the council long enough to remember when there have been attempts by some councilors to politicize certain boards, for example, the Board of Ethics, and the full council's review of Committee on Committees action has been helpful and useful. And so I don't think that's the case with 99.9% of what the Committee on Committees does or what the appointments to advisory committees are all about. But I am concerned on the face of not having the full council consent, at least to each appointment. And, I think also, frankly, from a volunteer perspective, while there is a short delay, there is meaning to being appointed to these committees. And while much of what they do is subject matter specific, they are bound by the town's code of ethics, and they are advising the council, and so the council should be voting on their appointment. And again, there have been times, often before consent agendas, where people would come to meetings where they were going to get appointed and stuff. So anyway, initially, my opinion is we ought to wait and hear more detail from Kevin, and then even if he says it's fine, I have some concerns about the council being removed from that process entirely.
Mr. Aylesworth.
So actually, I was going to speak to exactly what the deputy mayor just left off on. To me, there's two questions that, based on council's discussion, sounds like is emerging. First is it possible? Is it statutorily or by the charter allowable for the council to bestow this authority to the Committee on Committees? So that's question one. Kevin, Attorney Deneen already kind of weighed in very sort of superficially on this, so we could pursue a written opinion from him once he's had a chance to research it more. The second thing, though, is a concern that I'm hearing raised about, even if it's legally permissible, is this good practice? Because what if this, what if that, where the full council as a body, and you have 9 minds being applied as opposed to 2 or 3. I would just point out, and I guess I'd ask Kevin for his opinion on this, but just because the Committee on Committees has the ability to make those appointments, if the Committee on Committees, again, assuming that he reaches the conclusion that there is a path forward for the committee to make those appointments, I see no reason why the council wouldn't have the authority to rescind any appointments if it went really off the rails. The council would add to the agenda and just revoke, or rescind an appointment. So I think there'd still be a safeguard. Just because you give the committee the ability to do that doesn't mean the council is forever forfeiting its ability to make a correction. But I would want Attorney Deneen to confirm that layperson's interpretation would hold.
I will say that I also chaired the Committee on Committees. I think everybody at some point has that honor. When I took the chair back in 2009, we had a very, very major problem with membership on committees, particularly on the Board of Ethics, which was new, and which was created. No, which was new, and there were a number of reforms that were made at that time, like making the terms clear and appointing people for a known term and not letting people hang on forever, and a whole range of changes were made. And I think I was a bit burned by some of that experience. And I am less comfortable with letting a subset of three make final decisions. I think one of the things that has been done for a number of years is that once somebody is nominated, we encourage them to attend the council meetings, the committee meetings, and maybe they don't have the formal vote, but they can certainly participate in discussion, and because committees operate in a much less formal way than the council does, they can certainly begin the work of being a committee member. So my personal feeling is I would rather keep the council in charge, but I think also it would be very useful to have a legal opinion. So, Ms. Berthelot, do you think your committee might withdraw this motion pending receipt of the attorney's opinion?
Well, the motion's not on the table, so,
Okay.
but, so I'm happy. I'm certainly thought that this was an open question, so I think the idea, Mr. Ellsworth's idea to have a formal opinion is the right. I will say, though, that I think it's a bad idea. I don't think that we should bind ourselves to the past because it was difficult in the past. And I think that Peter's contribution or no, I'm sorry, it was Ryan's contribution that if we delegate, we can undelegate very quickly and very easily. And it says right here that the council shall appoint, oversee, terminate. So if it's decided that it's legally permissible and it is decided that this is something we want to do, I think there is definitely a safeguard in place that if things are not running smoothly and the committee is no longer working well, and then the council as a whole can undelegate that particular right
Appointment.
for the committee, that a particular delegation. Thank you.
All right, so there is no motion on the floor, and one is not going to be made, and we will request a formal opinion on the legal arguments that have been made by the Committee on Committees. Mr. Shuren,
I had another concern. I don't know if you want to take it now or wait until next.
just give me the nature of your concern.
The applicant's committee of interest vets and is asked for approval of now, in a practical matter, I think that's fine. As a conceptual matter, I can see a problem of being resistant to change. And I just wish to point that out.
I understand the concern. The issue, and I'm sure that you discussed this, is, and maybe this was from the bad old times, but there have been people appointed to committees whose function it was whose personal goals were to end the committee's work. They just disagreed so fundamentally. They brought a new perspective, certainly, but the other members of the committee wanted to proceed with what they saw as their charge. And so back when I was head of this, we made a point that there had to be a recommendation from the chair of the committee to which the person was being appointed, or an acceptance of this person, and some kind of a reference, so that the committee could continue to function, since the appointment was to make the committee function, not to unmake the committee. Yeah. All right, so the next, Mr. Kotchenberger?
Only, just similar to Ron's point, if, and I hope it does proceed, the process language, I think, needs a little review. Only, it assumes that there's only going to be one candidate, and while that's almost usually the case, there's only one, there's usually looking for people. There are times when there's two people or more for one slot, and the description of the process doesn't take that.
Are you interested in proposing some alternative language to the committee?
I can, but I don't know if it's premature.
Well, I would say that if you have a concern with language, this is your last chance. And I'm not suggesting you do it now, but that you email members of
will
the
do that.
committee with a proposed change for them to consider. All right, next item is reports of council committees. Has finance met?
We have not met.
Committee on committees.
We've not met.
Personnel.
Yeah, we met earlier and talked about our committee charge, which is still a work in progress. And I will invite anyone who has an idea about what an elevator talk on the charge for the Personnel Committee should be. By all means, let me know, and we'll integrate that into our discussion. And we also discussed a draft job description for a position of grants coordinator, which is in a very rudimentary stage.
Thank you. Anybody on departmental and advisory committee reports? Petitions, requests, and communications. I would like to call your attention to the letter from Mr. Tierney, the town manager of Hebron, who has wanted to thank our emergency firefighters for their mutual aid assistance, and he refers specifically to their helpfulness, their professionalism, and so on. So would like to make note of that and to congratulate our fire department on being both useful and effective and well-respected. Anything else? Anything for future agendas? Ms. Berthelot.
Thank you. I felt a bit behind tonight in the earlier conversation between Councilor Coleman and Mr. Ellsworth regarding the mitigation efforts for the lead. And I'm wondering if we could just get this on an agenda item rather than have, it was sort of an inside conversation, and I didn't really feel like I had any information, so, or I had some information, but I was just picking up because of the conversation. So it seems like it's an important issue, and just to have a presentation on what's going on would be super helpful.
I think it'd be a great idea to open up the discussion on that, put it on the next agenda for the next meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, the request is heard. Mr. Aylesworth. Any other comments for future agendas? All right. The next item is a motion to adjourn. Mr. Kotchenberger.
I move that we adjourn for the evening.
Is there a second? Mr. Coleman seconds. You're not going to make it any fancier than that?
I think no, I haven't said enough. No one's ever said enough. But I will say it's been a pleasure to for the town staff, and my fellow town council members. So thank you for your patience and friendship and collegiality. Good night.
Okay. Is there, there's a second to the, we got a second. All those in favor of adjourning, please raise your hand. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, one and all.
Recording stopped.